Hi, everybody. It's Glenn McKnight. This is a series of interviews we're doing with on behalf of the DC Coalition of Schools of Internet Governance for the forthcoming IGF. And we have as a special guest today from the African School of Internet Governance, Koliwe. Right? I think I probably screwed up the name, but you'll have to correct me. Thank you. And so today,
Thanks, Glenn.
we're going to talk about the history of the African school, the achievements, and where you're moving forward. And then the second half of the interview, we're going to talk about challenges you had because of COVID-19. Okay, so let's talk about the school.
Thanks so much for that, Glenn. My name is Koliwe Majama. I work with the Association for Progressive Communications, who are one of the conveners of the African School on Internet Governance. And I have organized the school from 2017. The coordinator is Henriette Esterhusen, who you all are familiar with as the chairperson of the multi-stakeholder advisory group at the IGF. So the planning or the initial history of the African School on Internet Governance goes as far back as 2002. And this was when there was an exploration around strengthening, developing country participation in international ICT policy decision making. And so at that time, a group of people came together to start, responding to this challenge, because I think there was a recognition, and it might still be the case now, in terms of just like global participation of, African voices within the global debates relating to not only just ITC or technology development, but internet governance in itself. So the idea of an annual school was obviously inspired by the European School on Internet Governance. So in mid-2012, a group of young Africans, Titi Akinsamni, who was at that point based in Nigeria and working on internet policy, is now with Google, together with Emila Voucher, who is with Facebook now, and Henriette, as well as Towela Nyirenda Jere, who was at the time with the NEPAD agency. They came up with an idea of an African School on Internet Governance. So if you visit the African School on Internet Governance website, you will find that we have a special section for the founder members. Right. So they then developed a concept around, the school. And I think when it was launched in 2013, they made a very short call for about 2 weeks and got more than 300 applications. But I want to say to date, we get as much as 800 applications every year, but only take up to about 40 fellows at the school. So the first school was held in 2013 in Durban. The school went back again in 2016 to Durban. We then moved to Mauritius in 2014. 2015 was in Ethiopia. 2017 in Egypt. 2018 Tanzania. 2019, which was our final face-to-face school, was held in N'Djamena, Chad. And I want to just share with you also, Glenn, as we begin, that the reason why we have rotated is because the school is a regional school and it follows the African Internet Governance Forum, so that the fellows at the school every year do have the practical experience of being part of a multi-stakeholder convening within the region.
And is it, what languages do you deploy? Do you do French and English, or just English?
No, it's just English. And that is one of the criteria for, applicants each year, to see the extent to which they would be able to engage. So how eloquent they are, and how the extent to which they can actually converse in English. And I must say that that has been one of the very, problematic issues around, just the funding of having translation during the school. translations are very expensive. But besides French, we also do have Arabic, and we also have Portuguese on the African continent. But I think as a standard, one needs to be able to participate in English.
And how do you select your topics? They're going to vary from year to year, but is there any vetting process for selecting what your key topics will be with the school? And how many days is the actual school?
So the school usually runs for 5 days. 2018 was a little peculiar in that we got a request from ISOC to do a pre-session. And that pre-session focused on multi-stakeholder engagement.
Mm.
So this was just the practicalities of, identifying and also the skills around negotiation. And that was really good because it was done by Larry Strickling, who was with ISOC at the time, but was really a champion around this at the time, because when we brought him to the school, he had actually been part of the campaign team for Barack Obama. And now I understand that he was part of Joe Biden's campaign as well. But it was good to have someone who comes through to look at, just the realities of, engaging firstly. But I think before you start engaging is being able to identify what it is you're taking to the table, what it is you're willing to compromise on. And that became very useful even when that specific cohort was working on the practicum. So we find that when we do have requests from especially the partners of the school to have a pre-session, we give the applicants or the fellows from that year the option of being part of that. But back to your question around the curriculum, I think we have a standard core curriculum that includes just an overview of, a multi-disciplinary dimension of internet governance, but obviously with an emphasis around, human rights-based approaches, the development approach as well, but also looking at the key internet governance or policy and practice issues as they, as they unfold within a given year in the region and also globally. So we have a good mix of, regional and international faculty. But our curriculum broadly covers internet governance, human rights, and development as one. The second would be resource management, the governance institutions, and multi-stakeholder decision-making. I spoke about that earlier, but that was especially packaged one. So we have a specific day that we look at, internet resource management. Then we look at the technological or legal and policy dimensions around internet governance. And this is where we would normally bring in, the national case studies, the regional trends, if there are any specific frameworks that are, looking at, unfolding within the 5 regions. So that's North, East, West, Central, and North Africa as well. Then we also look at the internet economy and the domain name market, which is really a very technical conversation that we normally have. But we always have like some of our core faculty members who've been working around, the technical or with the technical community, such as AfriDoria. We normally have ICANN there as well. And then the last issue that I'd highlight, which is the 5th, covering the 5 days, is the multilingualism, local content, and also just harmful use of the internet, where you find that there's sometimes parallels around specific issues to do with cybersecurity, but you're also looking at regulation in terms of just local content management and the trends in terms of, just general governance. The last thing I need to say around that is that the school doesn't usually have a specific theme. Our themes are usually focused or highlighted by the topics that we select. for the practicum. So in 2019, we didn't have a practicum. In 2020, we'll talk about that later. We were looking at digital cooperation. In 2019, in 2018, we looked at the GDPR, which was really largely contextualized around the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection.
Mm-hmm.
So this year, we are still in the planning phase, but are looking at what the highlight has been over the past year. And for us would be a focus really around digital trade, especially with the developments around what is called the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, but also because last year the African Internet Governance Forum was looking at the digital transformation strategy, which has a component of trade. So we're seeing that there might actually be, a parallel around, data protection, because there's a lot of issues around cybersecurity, e-commerce, and data protection within the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And it has a huge number of issues relating to digital ID as well. And, just what is the obtaining situation even around cybersecurity in respect of e-commerce. So that is likely to be our theme this year.
Great. Some of the schools actually have the students do assignments, and there's a lot of obligation on the fellows to have an expertise, say, whether it's a European school or the Nigerian school or others. Is this a requirement for your fellows to actually present on their expertise, or at the end of it, do a policy brief or anything like that?
Yeah, so the policy brief usually comes out from the practicum, but I must say that we also take people on board who are already working around internet governance issues. So one of the objectives of AfriSIG is to build a leadership around, internet governance related issues within the thematic or various issues that I've just spoken to, which are covered in the curriculum. So we do expect that someone who comes there has something to share. And within the actual application process, we do actually have a space to say, what is it exactly that you're going to contribute to the school in terms of engagement and experience sharing? And we found that there's a lot of networking that happens around that specific, area in terms of just like the engagements or the open plenaries.
Right.
But we ensure that the practicum happens across the 5 days. So on the first day, when we do all the introductions, we also do introduce the practicum and get the fellows at the school in a given year to actually meet after the main sessions of the school to work on whether it's a policy brief that they're working on, whether it's a statement. So in 2016, I will remember that the cohort came up with the statement around internet shutdowns, which was then presented at the African Internet Governance Forum. With the group from 2018, which focused on digital cooperation, they produced recommendations around digital cooperation in terms of what it is, a model for, the sort of for Africa in terms of, digital interdependence, but also looking at financing of, digital cooperation architecture, as well as just like the enhancing of African participation. I think one of the challenges really has been, how do we take, if we don't get audience at the African Internet Governance Forum, how can we then get whatever is produced at the school to be relevant or made reference to as we go? So apart from seeing, for instance, that statement I've made reference to from the 2016 group in academic researchers, we've also had requests from the African Union, for instance, has requested the practicum outcome around the GDPR. So I think we need to work around a lot of visibility around that as well. Then the last aspect is that when we do notice that we have a group or a representative of a stakeholder group, normally it would be the regulatory groups or the government stakeholders attending the school. We normally have them as resource people as well. So we extend a request to them for them to sit on not the main lecture. They wouldn't be part of the main lectures, but if we have a panel that's sitting to discuss a certain issue or experience, we normally take advantage of the diversity of the group that attends the school.
Yeah, that just lends me to think of two examples from two different schools I had interviews with, where they went through the policy development process, whether it through RAR or with ICANN, where they had to take on a certain role, whether a GAC person or a civil society person, and they had to usher through the policy through the process. So there must be a lot of debate and discussion and back and forth in terms of an actual bringing a policy into reality.
Yes. And what we found is that we spend hours at the school so every day we have a plenary session for
Right.
the practicum. And that's where you get a lot of debate. And normally when people are selecting their stakeholder groups, we usually encourage them not to be in a group that they belong to.
Right.
And I think that has helped a lot of the fellows in terms of how they relate to multi-stakeholder processes, because they already know what the compromises or what the positions of a government official, what the limitations for regulators within the African context would be. Because I think the trend is that most of the regulators would actually fall under a ministry of ICT, or report to the office of the president, and you find that it becomes so much easier for them to engage at that level. And also we encourage, just like the cross-pollination. If you don't understand or you cannot imagine how a government official would react in a certain instance, we try as much as possible to get them to cross-pollinate and share ideas around that. But you're right, the negotiation process around the final product usually sees us working right up till midnight. But we at the school have AfriDoria, who normally handles the practicums, and she's very patient. And also, I think what has helped is that we normally assign a faculty member to each of the stakeholder groups, so that there's a level of, getting to an agreement, but also just in terms of, just the quality around what it is that we expect in a given year.
Now, upon completion of any of the cohorts, I understand you have an alumni list. How do they keep in touch with you guys?
So every year we have a separate list for the cohort of the given year, but at the end of it, we get them to join the bigger group. So we have an email list, with fellows from 2013 right up till 2020. And what we do is encourage a lot of sharing around events, publications, and also we see a lot of, just like consulting each other around a specific position. So we had some members who were working in Nigeria, working specifically on a draft bill, the Digital Rights Bill. And they shared that on the alumni group emailing list, and people have input in that. But what we've also found, I think from 2017, is that there's also been a trend to set up WhatsApp groups. So you can imagine being a coordinator or organizer of the school, you find yourself with 6 or 7 groups. But they are also very active in that. Either than being social, they're also a platform to show off, this is what I've done. And we've seen that a lot of people are sharing the work that they do, and that has strengthened the networks for the individuals that are coming to the school every year. So once in a while, you'll get someone ask a question around whether anyone knows anyone who's a researcher in North Africa with a special focus on cybersecurity, and they just get the contacts just like that.
Right.
So I think and it's also just kept the school alive in terms of just like the different experiences that the fellows have had over the years.
Let's turn to the second part of this. The pandemic hit us hard in 2020 and now even in 2021. How has your school adapted? I understand you did not do a school. Did you do a virtual one in 2020?
Yes, we had a virtual one, and I must be honest and say that it was very difficult to plan the school last year.
Okay.
And this was because we were not sure whether the specific countries would be lifting a ban. I did mention at restrictions on travel and also just like the lockdowns in the specific countries. And I did say that we deliberately follow the African Internet Governance Forum. So they also took a little bit of time to, announce where it would be held in 2020. So what we did is decided that we would open only to AfriSIG alumni. So we have about 400 people that have attended the school since 2013. So it was open to them, but it was also open to the African Union Commission's Policy and Regulation Initiative for Digital Africa, who have a cohort of trainers. So they've had a series of training of trainers. And we felt that with the African Union Commission being a co-convener together with Research ICT Africa based in Cape Town, it would be good to bring several trainers or alumni of the school together. And we designed it in such a way that it would not only just engage or look at the few current topics at the time, but also build networking among the alumni. Because what we found in some instances is that because we sometimes bring alumni as faculty members, which is also, I think, a highlight of the school in that we find we've got leaders in internet governance who can actually carry a whole day's session and speak and share at the school. But what we found is that it was important to actually bring everyone together also in a unique networking environment. We split and had an AfriSIG alumni networking session and one for PREDA where they could just share what it is exactly that they've been doing, what are the challenges they're meeting, and what is it that they think we should do in terms of just like continuity of the school. But we only had 3 sessions over one day. And we looked at 3 main topics. The first one being financial services for the poor in Africa. And this one was looking at whether mobile money is actually a solution in Africa. And it was presented by an alumni. He attended the school 2018, Daniel Masiga, who is with the Collaboration of Internet Policy in Eastern Southern Africa, CIPESA. We also looked at the reality around 5G in Africa, and this was presented by international faculty. We had Steve Song and Peter Bloom. They held that session together. And then the last one was looking at the 4th Industrial Revolution, whether it provided a focus for ICT for development or was just a distraction. And that one was presented by Alison Gilward, who is, a member or a key faculty member, and also Research ICT Africa, who she is with, who she's the executive director there, is actually a co-convener of the school. So we had about 50 people attend the school. I think the reality being There are challenges, obviously, on the continent around internet connectivity, firstly. Secondly, is just the cost, which is why we had to make sure that each session was 2 hours. We obviously had challenges with connectivity. Some people couldn't join or dropped off, and that really, it was significant. We noticed that it had an impact on the school. But in terms of just the overall participation, because the African IGF was also held virtually, we had an opportunity to actually share at the African IGF, as we would have done even if it was held face to face, the key issues or the highlight of the school itself. So it was a struggle, but it did happen. It was less intense administratively, but obviously didn't feel the same, because I think what is peculiar to schools of internet governance, and I think you will agree, is the networking and, going beyond just the sessions to give time to people to interact and to also just build each other's capacity at a personal level.
Wow. Let's move on to 2021. What's the plans this
Yeah.
year, and do you have already plans in place for next year?
Yeah, no, so I think, so this year actually marks the 9th edition of the school. And I think with the reality of COVID-19 right now, within the African context, I think we're looking at, a probable third wave. And some of the issues that influencing this is, just like, different states have, different stages in terms of vaccination. There's, new variants of the pandemic coming through. But what we do see is that there's been quite a bit of interregional travel.
Yep.
There've been some events that have been held on the continent. So you will probably know that UNESCO had its annual World Press Freedom Day, convening in collaboration with the government of Namibia. But also that at national level, there seems to have been a relaxing of, the lockdown measures in terms of how many people can actually meet. So we're thinking of having a hybrid model, which will have virtual sessions, which will obviously be 2 hours long. And host up to about, the usual 50 people. But we're also thinking of complementing that with in-country hubs. And this is all going to be dependent on how we open up the call. We're still planning around whether we're just going to make it a broad call for all the regions, which is East, West, Southern, North, and Central Africa, or we're going to specifically look at regions that actually don't convene their own regional schools. And I think off the top of my head would be Southern Africa and Central Africa. So what would happen with the hubs is we would identify organizations that would host the fellows in the school, in the countries that we decide we're having fellows applying from, and that we will also assign a specific faculty member. And we feel that this would sort of bridge, like I shared with you, having just the virtual school took away the element around networking, which we really want to happen. Yeah. And when you look at the structure in terms of just hosting the practicums, it would be great to have everyone come who's based in one country meet at that in-country hub and be able to participate, but obviously meet virtually for the main plenary, practicum plenary sessions, which I described to you earlier as happening after the main sessions of the day. So we're still in the planning phase for this, and we are hoping that if this year's model works, we would be able to replicate it in 2022, but are seriously hoping that by 2022, a significant number of countries would have, gone through vaccination. There'll be a lot more clarity around, the certificates and restrictions, because one of the issues is the issues around, the compulsory quarantine. after you travel into a specific country. So we see that as a probable barrier in terms of, just like getting people to travel, because it would imply that I think it's 10 to 14 days that people have to self-quarantine at their own expense. So in some countries, you get into a country, they recommend a place where you have your quarantine, but you need to pay for that yourself.
Yeah.
And at AfriSIG, we never really pay for people's visas. So this would be an expense that we need to consider. But I must say the last thing is that we feel that the hubs would also deal with the issue that we have around connectivity on the continent. If we have an organization that's hosting with good connectivity, then the fellows would be able to connect to the school for the virtual sessions from the hubs.
Great.
And
Yeah.
so we're hoping to have the school in October, towards the end of October.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So any final comments?
No, I think just to say that in terms of just our impact, we've had 2 rounds of tracer studies. The first one looking at the school's achievements between 2013 and 2016. And then we did a second round, which was published last year, which was looking at the 7 editions from 2013 to 2019. And I think the greatest achievements have really been around personal benefit. We've seen a number of fellows, developing personally, some of them setting up their own organizations, representing the African region at IGF, Global IGF on the MAG. We've also seen a number of them sitting in the regional IG, in the African Internet Governance Forum's MAG as well, but also some actually initiating their own internet governance forums at national level. But also, lastly, I think would just look at, sometimes people come to the school representing or attached to a specific organization. And what we've seen is that there's been a lot of incorporation of internet governance into existing areas of work in the region, and also just the strengthening of approaches in like the work that they're doing, but also a development of new areas of work. This is why you find on the African continent now, we should have about 4 to 5 digital rights networks, which are run or that are coordinated by organizations that actually do have members of their secretariat or staff that attended the African Internet Governance School. So I think it's been a really good journey. And I think that with the number of schools that we have, national, sub-regional schools, is also an indication, and that some of them keep coming back to us as the organizers for assistance with their own curriculum, with recommendations for faculty members, is also an indication of how much the school has grown. So yeah.
Wow, that you've given a great presentation, and you represent the organization really well. I attended in Durban. I was a volunteer, and I'm not sure if you're at the same one, but I was doing.
Which year was this? 20? Because I was at the 2016 one as a fellow.
I was the videographer, so I volunteered. I was pretty busy, so but it was a great event, and it's inspired me to attend as many schools as I possibly can, remotely or otherwise. But great, thank you, and I'll get this recording to you. It'll be part of the collection, and we'll work out the logistics on. But definitely, anyone who's going to be attending the IGF event and our workshop will be accessing these videos, and you're more than welcome to put it on your website.
Thank you so much, Glenn. Thank you. And I think also that the continuing learning for the school, being on the dynamic coalition, is also very, very helpful. So thanks for that as well. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Glenn.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.